All right, everybody, welcome into Sports and Money. I hope you're doing well today. It is a privilege to have you on board. I'm doing something totally new for me, so it's going to be sloppy. I absolutely promise. I'm sitting here between recordings. We've got a YouTube show we just did record that's already up now. Sitting around waiting on my podcast to do at 10 o'clock, and I've been planning this for a while. I'm wanting to do a Kansas City Chiefs NFL mock draft here, all 7 rounds. So again, I promise this is going to be sloppy, and I don't have a well orchestrated plan. It's just stream of consciousness here based on a couple of things I wanted to do with Kansas City. So there won't be any trades involved. I'm not going to do any trades. It's just picking by round. Let's talk about it. So if you can put up with the sloppy, I'd love to have you hang around here for a few minutes. We'll try not to make it take all night, and we'll see how this goes. Okay. So welcome in as always. Hope you're doing well. Draft is really, really close, and I know everybody's excited for it. Who wouldn't be? Hope comes in you. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to start this draft. I'm on the PFF mock simulator. There's several. There's NFL mock draft database simulator. There is, I think, Pro Football simulator, and then there's PFF. So there's probably more than that actually. There's 5 or 6, but I love all of them. PFF is the one I'm using tonight. So I will not bore you necessarily with what all the other teams did, but I will share screen and you can kind of sort of just get a real glimpse of what these teams are doing. So I'll, again, stream of consciousness slop here. Caleb Williams, #1 overall. Daniels, the quarterback, #2. McCarthy, the quarterback to the Patriots at 3. No huge surprises there necessarily. Neighbors, 4 to the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison at 5. I'm going to start scrolling through here. Looks like Drake May under this computer draft falls #11 to the Vikings. So I'm sure on some level they would be happy if a quarterback dropped to them. Get in here later in the early 20s, late teens, you're starting to think about what players might slide. That's what I would be thinking about. I'm not trying to play Brett Veach tonight or Andy Reid, but I would be thinking about, hey, what player is sliding down the board that I'm interested in? And I will say, even though I'm not doing any trades tonight, I'm just not. And I know some of you guys out there are like all about the wide receivers, and some of you are all about a tackle. I really think as a general manager, you got to be open to everything that might happen. And I will say, if a guy like Olu Fashanu, I'm showing him here, I think at pick number 20 for the Steelers, if he were to fall just a little bit farther, like 22 to the Eagles or something like that, I would be tempted to trade up there and get a guy that's that talented at tackle. And I know he didn't have the greatest year, but I would be tempted. So in another universe, that might happen. Won't happen tonight. But again, Mims going there to #23. If you're the Chiefs, you're like, okay, that's another tackle off the board. What I don't want to do, and I might do it anyway, but what I'm hoping doesn't happen is that I don't have a tackle sitting there at 32 that I don't care about. If one's going to slide to 27, 28 that I like, then maybe I trade up. I just don't want one sitting there at 32 that I don't care about. So anyway, we're starting to work our way through here. Who's not available? Cooper DeJean gone for the Cowboys at 24. Nate Wiggins gone. Chop Robinson gone. So you can see here Kool-Aid McKinstry is gone. Darius Robinson gone. Jordan Morgan gone to the Ravens. And then Xavier Worthy. So I'm not going to do this with all the rounds, but the first round I do think is important to get a glimpse and see who's gone. So if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, what are my choices? Well, that brings us right here. Drazon Newton, and we've seen a lot of mocks that have him sliding down the boards, probably because of size, because his tape is really good. And while I would like to have him there at defensive tackle, we know that's not the top need necessarily for Kansas City. So I like Newton, and I like bringing in the defensive tackle, but probably not going to do that. Adonai Mitchell is the guy that I think a lot of Kansas City fans would realistically hope would be there, that we realistically would take. So that's probably where I'm going to go. But just so you can see what else is here. Troy Franklin, he's almost guaranteed to be there early second round, wide receiver out of Oregon. I will be very surprised if he's drafted first round. 2 guys right here. Peyton Wilson, linebacker out of NC State, and Tyler Newman, safety out of Minnesota. And I'm going to add a third one right here because we're just draft talking tonight, sloppy draft talk. Zach Frazier, center out of West Virginia. All three of those guys, I I really feel like are going to be highly coveted by NFL teams, but they're waiting and hoping they can get them at the start of the second round, somewhere in the top 40. I kind of doubt, I kind of doubt that those three guys are going to get drafted late first round. They could, just not expecting it. So if I'm Kansas City here, I'm kind of looking, and this is a very realistic scenario. I'm kind of looking between Ladd McConkey, the wide receiver out of Georgia, who's kind of the explosive, cross the middle, high speed route runner kind of guy, just loose talking here. And then I've got Adonai Mitchell there, the wide receiver out of Texas, who is more of that big physical guy. In an ideal world, if I were the Chiefs, I'd love to just trade up the board and get some tackle that I really like that has fallen to like number 22, somewhere in there. That didn't happen this draft. So instead, I'm going to stick and pick, and it's either Adonai Mitchell or it's Ladd McConkey. I like both guys. I really do. I like both guys. I think Kansas City would be fine with either one. But if I'm the Chiefs, I'm hoping to get not one, but two wide receivers out of this draft. I don't want to draft this rich in wide receivers to go by me and me not get two of them when I need wide receivers. And I'm going to need them for the next few seasons. So I really, really think I can get somebody Ladd McConkey-ish later in the draft. I think even second, third, and fourth rounds, when my pick comes up, I think there's a chance 64, 95, maybe even 131. Maybe. I think there's a chance I can get a wide receiver possibly that could add to some of that kind of cross mesh stuff, speed stuff that McConkey can do. I don't feel like I'm going to get a true physical receiver like Adonai Mitchell, probably down there at 64, and certainly not at 95, not who also has enough speed to go with it at the NFL level. So here it is, sloppy talk. Adonai Mitchell going wide receiver out of Texas. And I don't know if this will happen. He may get drafted 28 to the Bills, but in this mock, here he goes. So let's see what the computer did. We are at pick 64 now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's just see who went right before us. Ricky Pearsall. I don't think Pearsall is going to last 58, but here he is. Jonah Ellis, edger, Utah. Jaden Hicks, safety, Washington State. Chris Braswell, Marshawn Kneeland, Chris Jenkins. The only reason that's relevant, when mocks repeatedly show a cluster of 5 to 10 guys that are kind of going right before where you're going. And again, Brett Beach and Andy Reid, they'll have all of their own intel to mix in with whatever they're seeing from anywhere that they want to talk about. When you see a cluster of guys, you're at least thinking about, is there a guy sitting 5, 10 picks ahead of me that I want to kind of trade up and go get that I really, really like? So that's the only reason that's important here. And obviously that's not going to affect my draft. What is going to affect my draft is who's still available. So here it is. Running back, Blake Corum out of Michigan. I like him. But Kansas City doesn't really need that. I'm going to mess this name up, but it's okay. Kieran Amegadjie. That's probably not right. But tackle out of Yale. Seen a little bit of him. Like him. My only problem, and I know some of you are screaming, hey, draft him. He's got a chance. Kansas City hasn't done very well with developmental tackles. I mean, even the Orlando Brown experiment didn't work out great, in my humble opinion. I didn't like him holding up against edge rushers. I just didn't. So I'm a little worried ever since we let go of Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher about us developing another tackle who doesn't kind of have first round athletic ability already. So I'm wide open to drafting the tackle out of Yale right here, but I am concerned about that. Quietly behind closed doors, right? Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker out of Texas A&M. So this is kind of Edgerrin Cooper's more your athletic kind of guy. He's more of the stay focused, give him something to do, and he'll do it kind of linebacker out of Texas A&M. Tons of athletic guys coming out of Texas A&M the past couple of seasons. They tend to be raw, but Kansas City has shown that we can develop linebackers. We have illustrated that over the past 3 or 4 seasons. So I'm strongly considering putting in a linebacker here. And I know it's not a tackle, it's not a wide receiver, but I'm strongly considering that. So Edgerrin Cooper's a guy I would definitely be looking at. Guard Christian Haynes out of Connecticut, I like, don't need, so we'll let him go. Malachi Corley, wide receiver out of Kentucky. This is kind of what I was talking about. And again, we all have ways that we hope a draft will pan out, but you got to have every angle covered because the draft will ultimately just be a kind of a hodgepodge of what you expect. Malachi Corley is a guy, wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, who can do so many of the same things that Ladd McConkey can do. I think McConkey's probably more physical, and that's not unusual for Georgia guys. But Malachi Corley is a guy who, if you want crossing route stuff, speed stuff, gadget stuff, pretty good route runner, all of that, this is where I would be tempted to go right here out of Western Kentucky. So my question is, and I'll give you all a look at what else may be sitting here. On Andrew Phillips, CB out of Kentucky, Brandon Dorless, Oro out of Clemson. Nothing else there super tempting. For me, ultimately, right here, it's Malachi Corley or it's Edgerrin Cooper. And I have no problem if anyone wants to go Cooper. I'm tempted to go Cooper, but I'm going to get that second wide receiver. The only question would be, if I'm sitting there at 95, is there another receiver that I think I can get here for Kansas City that would do something similar to Malachi Corley? And there are guys. Jacob Cowan from Arizona is sitting down there. The kid from Virginia, I can't remember his name, but he's sitting down there, does a lot of the similar things. So if I or Brett or Andy like Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, if I like him enough, especially considering I've got Adonai Mitchell already, then I'm going to be tempted to take Cooper and then see if I can catch kind of the poor man's gadget guy out of Virginia or Arizona. But let's be clear, the Virginia and Arizona guys, they are small. They are not NFL size. They are strictly kind of gadget guys. So they're not really your prototypical even slot receivers necessarily. They really are more gadget type guys. So you're losing some size here if I wait till 95 to draft somebody. It is a deep wide receiver class, and I do like Edgerrin Cooper. I am so split here, but I'm going to go ahead and take Malachi Corley, wide receiver out of Western Kentucky. If you disagree, well, let me know. Okay, third round of the sloppy draft. Let's see who just went right before us. There it is, Malik Washington, the kid from Virginia, wide receiver. He goes 93 to the Ravens, so that was who I thought would be there. He is. He goes right before us. Guard Cooper Beebe there at 88 out of Kansas State. That's a good guard. That's a guard who was projected in a lot of mock drafts months ago to go significantly higher. He's dropping here lately. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver out of Washington, Tampa Bay. That would be an interesting guy. And nothing else jumps out at me right there. So I'm not super disappointed that somebody else just went right there. So once again, third round pick, number 95. This is where I really feel like the draft drops off a lot. There's always tiers, right? And there are going to be guys here that I like, but a lot of my favorite guys are just gone after this. So Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State, whom I like, but we don't need. Javon Solomon, edger out of Troy. I don't like drafting edgers late, man. I just don't. Unless I see some attribute there that I know I can handle, that I know can be part of the rotation. I'm just not huge on it. Sometimes it's necessary. Safety, Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech, always a possibility. I'm going to stop right here. This is the guy I like, Jeremiah Trotter, linebacker out of Clemson. I'm gonna go ahead and draft him. I'll give y'all a second to see what else is sitting right here. There's Tracy, Stover, Hooney. Ben Sinnott is an interesting guy, but listen, linebacker Jeremiah Trotter out of Clemson. Trotter has things that are going to keep him from being a star in the NFL. I don't think there's any question about it. It's why he's not being mocked in the first round or even for the most part in the second round. NFL experts have taken a look at him and said, hey, I won't get into why today, taking a look at him and said, hey, this just isn't a high-end kind of an athlete, but he's got the bloodlines. He played very well at Clemson. He was a ballyhooed athlete at Clemson, and I like what he can offer in a lot of different areas just as a good, solid rotation linebacker and maybe someday a starting linebacker for us. And again, we have shown for Kansas City, this is so key, we have shown we can develop linebackers. We have shown that. So I'm all about Jeremiah Trotter here. It's the pick that's jumping off the board for me. I won't even take much time with that. Pick number 131. We've got four more high end picks. This is really the part, and again, I don't know where Brett Veach stands on this. I don't know if he would ever even publicly tell us, or even, in some cases, GMs wouldn't even privately tell you. I feel like the first three rounds, the general manager really should be maybe the loudest voice in the room, unless it's an Andy Reid involved. Unless there's an Andy Reid or a Bill Belichick or a Mike Tomlin involved, the GM should get a lot of the say in the first three rounds because it's talent based. Once you start getting out of those top 100 picks, once you start getting out of those top 100 picks, there's not as much talent on the board, and it's starting to be about scheme fit and who the coaches like and who they need, who they really feel like they need. So at this point, I would really be starting to lean heavier, and this is for any team, but maybe not so much the Chiefs. But for your average NFL team, this is why I would really start leaning heavily on the coaching staff to be like, who really fits the scheme that you want to run and who really is stepping out to you. Brendan Rice, wide receiver out of USC, huge step down here from the guys you could get in the third round, just a massive step down. Bortolini, center, Wisconsin. Chris Abrams-Draine, CB out of Missouri, just immediately jumps off here. He's a guy who's projected several picks higher in a lot of mocks over the past few weeks. He could slip here. I'm very interested in pulling him in, but let's see who else is here. Safety, Cole Bishop out of Utah. I like that too. Jordan McGee, linebacker out of Temple. I like McGee, but having already drafted Trotter, don't believe we're going to do that. Theo Johnson, tight end, Penn State. Carter, interior out of Duke. Liafu, linebacker, don't need that. I tell you, okay, so let's sit here. I won't scroll any further in this round. Excuse me. Mason Smith, defensive tackle out of LSU. This is a legit defensive tackle. I'm surprised he's dropping this far, but he is. LSU actually has not one but two defensive tackles who, if you had looked back, say, to the start of the college football season, they both were very ballyhooed and were considered, hey, first round draft picks, if not second round draft picks. They've dropped off here as they've gone through the draft process. But Mason Smith is a guy, defensive tackle out of LSU. He's more of the bigger style. Mekhi Wingo, I think, is more of the smaller style and more of the kind of split, maybe get pressure on quarterback. Mason Smith here is a guy I think I'm interested in picking because if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, we've kind of been picking and plugging here at defensive tackle for several years now. We've tried to draft guys and they've been okay, but nobody's really been standout other than Chris Jones, of course, who's the obvious one. But we've been trying to add to that. We haven't been able to. Same thing for Leonard Taylor. Both of these guys look like they could be rocks in the middle, dominant but rocks. So I think I'm just going to stop right here. It's almost a coin flip, but I tend to like LSU players better. And based on the film that I've seen, I like Mason Smith a little bit better too. So I'm drafting Mason Smith. If you like, and give me 1 second here, who was there? If you would rather get the Chris Abrams-Draine corner out of Missouri, totally understand. I know some of y'all are going to want that. Totally understand. But in this case, I just like Mason Smith too much. I watched him too much at LSU. So I'm really going to pick him here and try to what that's hopefully going to do. This is looking ahead a little bit, right? He may not play a whole lot this year unless he's really showing out. But come next year, when I can start to let some of those other guys go out of that interior defensive tackle spot or even the edge position, he will start to grow in the snaps is what we're looking at. We are at pick 159, fifth round. Here's who went right before. The names get a lot less familiar here. I've studied about 150 players in this draft. I haven't had time to study all of them. It's been very mixed as to who I've actually spent time studying. James, CB out of Auburn, would love to add him in here if he's available. Tight end Jaheim Bell out of Florida State. It's an interesting mix. Nobody else that's really jumping off. So who's actually available here in the sloppy fifth round? Cam Hart, CB out of Notre Dame. Know a lot of people who like him. Not many of them like him enough to draft him in the third round. But a lot of people think that this might be a nice add-on here. That's a good chance for us. I'm going to look through here. What else might be available? I'll tell you, Zach Zinter, a guard out of Michigan. I don't know if Zinter will ever be anything more than kind of a margin starter in the NFL, maybe develop into a decent starter. But Zinter's attitude, I love. Go back and watch some tape on Zinter. If you want somebody, and Kansas City doesn't really need anybody like this, but if you want somebody to mix it up and bring some attitude and bring some fight and bring some fire and bring some feisty, Zinter's your guy. Kansas City does not really need that, so we're not overly worried about that. I like Trevin Wallace here, linebacker out of Kentucky, but we already picked a linebacker. I just don't feel the need to do that here on tonight's broadcast. So let's go back here and get the guy that I instantly saw that I wanted, and that's going to be cornerback Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. Don't know how good he can actually be, what's the ceiling there, but I do feel like he's a desirable player. We will add him in. I'm not even going to look and see who was left off here in the sixth round. We're at pick 173 immediately. Immediately. I'm just going to tell you right now. Keaton Oladapo, safety out of Oregon State, is a guy that I have watched since all the way back to the beginning of the college season. Oregon State, very, very physical defense. Think maybe in terms of Iowa defense, maybe not quite that technically sound, maybe not quite that athletic, but along those lines, the Oregon State players, I think if their coach, and I don't remember his name, if he had stuck around a few years, he might have been able to develop kind of that Iowa level of technical plus physical plus athletic. So these are along the same lines here. But Oladapo is a guy who's been pretty consistent here in the fifth, sixth rounds. This is a player I would want to have on the team. So Keaton Oladapo. I'll glance real quickly to see who else might be here. There's Bo Limmer, Bertrand, Kalen King. I tell you, okay, Kalen King here, CB out of Penn State. This was a guy who was mocked way earlier in a lot of drafts, but he hasn't really held up to the process. But here's another guy, just like Zach Zinter. Kalen King is a fiery, fiery guy. I am very tempted here to take Kalen King. I can't tell you how tempted I am to take him. So it's Kalen King, CB out of Penn State versus Keaton Oladapo, safety out of Oregon State. Oh, man. Oladapo is the more physical kind of sound guy, but I think we're going to go Oladapo here. That was the first guy I saw. We'll let Kalen King go to somebody else, but Keaton Oladapo, safety out of Oregon State. This is our last pick. Pick 221 in the seventh round. Again, no trades here tonight. James Williams, safety out of Miami. That was not bad. Barner, tight end out of Michigan. Joe Milton, quarterback out of Tennessee. That big arm that he's got. Briggs out of Cincinnati. Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa. Who else is down here? We're really starting to reach the bottom here. Frank Gore, Nathan Thomas, Jalen Sundale, Austin Reed, Fabian Lovett. That's an interesting guy right there. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody else I can't do without, to be quite honest. So let's go back up here to the top. This is probably the player. Yeah, part of me is almost wishing I hadn't drafted the other safety. Yeah, I don't really want to draft two safeties, right? I was going to draft James Williams because I think he's the best player left, but we don't need that. So let's scroll back through here a little bit. This is where it gets really sloppy. Not a huge draft plan. Shoot, don't need another wide receiver. Necessarily need tight ends. You know what? What the heck? I do think these are two guys worth taking a look at. So we'll take a flyer on a tackle here. So it's Nathan Thomas, tackle out of Louisiana, and it's Jalen Sundale, tackle out of North Dakota State. Placement is everything in those earlier rounds. Again, if you're sitting at 64, whatever it is, and there's a tackle there that you like, or there's a tackle there, say at 50, 55 that you like, then you take that guy. If not, then you take the player you like. No matter what, this is important because I'm either going to draft Thomas or Sundell here and take a flyer on him. This is so important, though. No matter what, if you're drafting players you don't like or that you just kind of feel lukewarm on, you're wasting your time. You need to draft players that you like. But no matter what you do, you're going to have to scheme for something. So we're either going to have to scheme for wide receiver, we're going to have to scheme for a weakness at tackle, we're going to have to scheme for a weakness at defensive back. You've always got to scheme for something. You can't fix everything in a single off season. And no matter how good you are at roster building, you're always going to have weak spots or shallow spots or even just bad spots. And you're going to spend the entire season scheming around that. So we haven't fixed tackle. I understand that. They're going to have to scheme around that. Bring in a veteran, scheme around that under these circumstances. Okay. So for those of you, and listen, I was going to do another mock. I'm not going to have time. I'm going to do another mock in which I traded up to get Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, but we won't do that tonight. So anyway, here's our flyer. It's Nathan Thomas, tackle out of Louisiana, Jalen Sundale, tackle out of North Dakota State. I like both guys. Watched a little bit of film on both guys, but we'll finish it out by taking Nathan Thomas, tackle out of Louisiana, and that will wrap it up. So they're going to give us some draft grades here. Basically, their draft grades are built on did you get a guy that they rated a certain point? Did you get that guy higher or lower than where they had that guy? Had that guy mocked. So for Adonai Mitchell, they gave us an A+. For Corley, they gave us an A-. So they like that. The linebacker pick they didn't like, C+. The Mason Smith pick at a B, they were okay with that as well. Cam Hart, B-. Oladapo, B-. Nathan Thomas with a B. So PFF was okay with our draft. They gave it an A-. That's fine. Not overly worried about whether or not they liked it. But anyway, that's it. Anyway, thank y'all for listening. I know this was sloppy, but I meant for it to be, or I knew that it would be. And so appreciate y'all watching, and we'll see y'all next time. Have a great one. Thank you, everybody. Bye.